All right, so we'll get going here. So the first couple questions here, so you're matching the landmarks. So before exploring the features of the skull, let's review some of the different types of bony landmarks. So matching these up, what did you pick for, like, what did you match a process with? What is a definition of a process? What do you guys go with? What is a process? Or you can go with fossa. What is a fossa? What is the definition of a fossa?
A shallow depression in a bone.
Yeah, that's correct. So a fossa is that shallow depression in a bone. You got it. So you went with you. That was fossa. What about a foramen? What is a foramen?
An opening in a bone.
Yep, that's an opening. So then what was the process? Then you would have went with.
Projection from a bone.
You got it. Okay, so for the next one, I've got preset one already loaded for you up here. Now I just need to color the bones. I'm gonna make them a bunch of different colors. So first bone we'll start with right in front of us here. We have the frontal bone, and it'll tell you like the table talks, you know. So it's a frontal bone, and I'm gonna make it a different color. So we can make it, let's make it this kind of salmon color. That should work. Oh, no, let me just make sure. Let's go with, all right, we'll make it that color, kind of this pinkish color there. Okay, so there's the frontal bone. Made that pink. Now the next bone we need to identify is the parietal bone. And we have two parietal bones. Let's go from the superior view here. There's the parietal bone there. There's the left parietal bone. There's the right bone. Let's make the parietal bone, let's make the right parietal bone a different color. Let's make it orange. So we'll make the right parietal bone orange. Might as well, let's just make the left one orange too. Oh, we do that, but we can jump back in there. All right, there we go. We made the parietal bones orange. Okay, so now let's go with the temporal bone. Where's the temporal bone? Well, that's on the side of the skull here. There's the temporal. And let's make that, let's see what colors we have here. Let's make it yellow, like this kind of yellow mustard yellow color there. All right, so there's the temporal bone. Occipital bone, and we have two temporal bones. So if you go over here, here's other temporal. We'll just leave that one uncolored there. But the occipital bone, here's the occipital bone right. There you can see the external occipital protuberance, the EOP, that bump. If you slide your hand towards the back, on the back of your head there, you feel that bump. That's your EOP. But your occipital bone, let's go with a green color. So the occipital bone is going to be a green color there. The sphenoid. So if we go back here to the side view, we can see sphenoid bone. So there's the sphenoid bone. It's known as the keystone of the skull. Why would it be called that? Well, because it's connecting a lot of the skull bones to the skull here. So sphenoid bone, we went with green last time for the occipital bone. Let's go with a blue color there. So there's our sphenoid bone. If we look and we turn and we look at actually the orbit, you can see the sphenoid bone is part of our orbit there. We can see the sphenoid bone, that blue bone right there. It kind of looks like a butterfly or a bat. It's a very interesting looking bone. So that is the sphenoid bone. There's the ethmoid bone right there. So the ethmoid bone, let's make that a different color so then we can really see it. We'll go with kind of this purple color there for the ethmoid bone. So there's the ethmoid bone right there. You can see it. It does make up part of the orbit there, right there. And of course, part of the nasal cavity as well. So that's the ethmoid bone. The nasal bones, there's the right nasal bone. Let's make that Let's see here. Let's make that kind of a like a lighter purple there. So there's a nasal bone. There's one. And we can just make that the same. Well, it's a little bit different color purple there, but those are the nasal bones. The zygomatic bone. So the zygomatic bone is the, so there's the right one. There's of course a left one too. But let's make that, let's go with kind of the gray color or the white color there. So there's the zygomatic bone or the cheekbone. That's the zygomatic bone. Now, the zygomatic bone on the other side, there's the zygomatic bone on the other side right there. We'll color that one too. The maxilla. The maxilla is jaw here. And you can see there's the right and the left, but they maxilla. And we can make the maxilla. Let's make that a red. We haven't used red yet. Let's make let's make it red. Okay, there we go. So you can see the maxilla is red there, making up the upper jaw there. The mandible. Let's go with the mandible. This is the skull bone that this is the skull bone that actually moved. One of the facial bones here that actually moved. Let's see here. What color should we make that one? Let's make it like a teal. So there you can see the mandible, a nice teal color. All right, if we go from the side here, we can see all these different bones. All right, so that looks good right there. Look at this down here. This is your hyoid bone. This isn't part of the activity, but the hyoid bone is not, remember, that's not articulating with any other bones here. It's just hanging out down there. All right, so now is a good time to take that screenshot of the skull bones here, and then you can submit that where you in that place there on Schoology for this actual activity. So yeah, definitely if you haven't loaded up that activity, make sure you jump into that. That's what we're working in is the skull bones activity. But now is a good time to take that screenshot. And once you take that screenshot, just if you could give me a thumbs up, I believe you should be able to do that on Zoom. You give me a thumbs up once you get that screenshot. And then, so I'll just give you a little bit of time here to take that screenshot. But once you do get that screenshot, please give me a thumbs up. And I should be able to see that. You can even just like take a picture with your phone too, if you want. And then you can upload it later too. So something in the chat. All right, so Brinley's got it. Excellent. All right, somebody else. Okay, cool. Katie, what about you? How's it going? Oh, that must have been in the chat. Okay, everybody's got it. Excellent. So now we're gonna keep going here. So we're just, this is preset number one. You got your screenshot of all the bones that we just colored there. Now let's go to preset number two. Number two here. All right, now we're looking at preset number two, and we're going to tap on the color structures to identify them. And then in the spaces below, we're going to answer these questions. So looking at, let's just bring this over to the middle here. What is like, let's just take a look at this right here. So this is the, what is that specific process there highlighted in yellow? Well, that's a mastoid process. That's that large bump. Like if you go, you touch your ear and then you just go, you slide inferior from your ear there. Then you have that big bump there. That's your mastoid process. Now you have this little pointy process that's also part of the temporal bone, but it's the styloid process. Like, you know, like the styloid like the stylus of those little fake pens that you can use on iPads. You know, that's like a sharp, pointy process. So same thing with the styloid process here. So the green right here is the styloid process. Um, and again, the styloid process is of the temporal bone. The mastoid process is of the temporal bone. So they both are bone features of the temporal bone. Now, if we go up here, let's take a look at this right here. This is in purple here highlighted. That is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. It's called the zygomatic process, and I'm just gonna put this a little more in center here. It's called the zygomatic process because it's a process that goes towards what? Well, it goes towards the zygomatic. So the zygomatic process of the temporal bone it projects towards the zygomatic bone. That's why it makes sense. That's why it's called the zygomatic process. Now let's look at the zygomatic bone here. There's the zygomatic bone. And again, that's your cheekbone right there. But what about this bone feature on the zygomatic process? Well, this is the temporal process of the zygomatic bone. Why is it called the temporal process? Well, it's a projection that goes towards the temporal bone. That's why it's called the temporal process. All right. Now we're going to look at, this is the coronoid process of the mandible. This is the coronoid process of the mandible, that lower jaw. And we have the coronoid process here. There's the coronoid process. So which two structures together form the zygomatic arch? Well, right here, this is the zygomatic arch here. And what two structures are going to make that? Well, the zygomatic and temporal processes form the zygomatic arch. So here's a zygomatic arch here. Combining the zygomatic and temporal processes, we have the zygomatic arch. All right, we're going to continue on unless anybody has any questions on any of that. All right, we're going to go to preset number 3. So let me load up preset number 3 here. All right, so now we're taking a look at preset number 3. We're looking at the inferior view of the skull here. So I'll zoom in here. You can see highlighted in purple here. So this is the foramen magnum. So this foramen meaning hole or passageway, and magnum meaning large hole. So that's the foramen magnum. That's where the brainstem and spinal cord come out of the skull here. So tap on the color structures to identify them. We did that, and then answer these questions. So the mandibular fossa, we can take a look at that. So the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. So here's the mandibular. Um, so this is the mandibular fossa, where the mandible sits and articulates with the temporal bone. That's the mandibular fossa. So the mandibular fossa is of the temporal bone. Now look, if we look at the mandible, the actual part of the mandible that articulates with that mandibular fossa is the condylar process of the mandible. So this is the condylar process of the mandible, highlighted in purple here. Oh, there we go. The condylar process of the mandible articulates with the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. So the condylar process is a bone feature of the mandible, and the mandibular fossa is a bone feature of the temporal bone. So then we take a look back here, and this is where we started out looking at the bone here. And again, this large hole here is the foramen magnum. So the foramen magnum is a bone feature of the occipital bone. And then what structure do you think passes through here? This large opening? Well, that's the brainstem slash spinal cord coming through there.
You say further up the zygomatic process of the zygomatic bone or the frontal bone?
So are you talking about like the preset number 2? Like
Yeah, it was question number 5.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah, I don't actually have the questions here, but you said the zygomatic process of the what?
Did we say zygomatic bone?
So, so here's the zygomatic bone right here, and here's the temporal. So the zygomatic process is going to be actually the zygomatic process is going to be of the temporal bone. Good question. And
Thank
then
you.
the temporal process is going to be of the zygomatic bone. So
Okay.
it'll just be this little sliver, and you can't see where my hand is pointing, but my finger is pointing there. I suppose I could get I think this is like good. I can draw. Yeah, I can just draw here. So here, this would be the zygomatic process right here. This thing right here is the zygomatic process. Because of the temporal bone, because it belongs to the temporal bone, but it's projecting towards the zygomatic bone. And then this would be the temporal process right here of the zygomatic bone. It is a projection going towards the temporal bone.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, cool. So let's get out of that, and then we're gonna go to. All right, let's go to the next. Oh, actually, we've gone through these pretty quickly, which is good. These activities are nice and everything's moving smoothly. So let's now we're gonna go to this one might take a little bit of time to load up here, but let me get the patient scan. We're gonna look at some fractures. And so the 0325, 0325. I'm gonna go to gonna take us back to the home screen real quick. We've got to go to the case library, I believe. Yeah, we got to go to the case library and then search. And that would be 0325. 0325. Multiple fractures. That would be this one. We need this one. All right, and this one might just take a second to load up here. So we're going to take a look at some multiple. This is actual imaging here that they've actually 3D scanned into the table. And we're going to take a look at somebody's facial fractures. Oh, I did not pull up the case. It would have had a little description on it. But it usually doesn't say too much. It just kind of gives you like a radiology report. But let's take a second to load this up. And we'll take a look at some fractures of the face here. So you're going to have a question. I'll say select the bones that have been fractured. So I'm going to bring this to the center here so we can really see what's going on here. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But if we take a look, and you can't actually select the bones, but let's see here. So look at the maxilla. So let me get I'm going to get the actual, yeah, I'll use the pointer here. So you should be able to, oh, let me see. Okay, yeah. So like here you can see the maxilla. That's just been, ooh, yeah. Look at that. So lots of fractures here. This should be all together. There's the maxilla there. Then here you can see, look at the frontal bone. There's a nice chunk that was just taken off of there. There's a lot of A lot of bones that have been fractured here. And let me get out of this so I can actually spin it around. Where's the cheekbone here? Well, there's some of it right there. The zygomatic bone was just shattered. Here you can see the temporal bone. So there's a lot of different fractures here. And you can see, so the temporal, remember the zygomatic process of the temporal bone, that was shattered. The mandible, look at that, there's fractures there. Yeah, so this is not looking good here. The mandible, looking on the anterior view here, look at all these fractures. It's just broken apart there. So that's, yeah. So we've got a few different, you can see the zygomatic bone definitely fractured, the mandible definitely fractured, the maxilla definitely fractured. The temporal bone, we have the zygomatic process is definitely fractured there. Let's look at the other temporal bone over here. That one looks pretty good. We don't see any real fractures there. What else? There's a lot of fractures. But yeah, that's a good one. I'm just gonna select some of these. So that one, oral. You'd even argue that the nasal bone looks like it's not smooth, so there's definitely a fracture there too. I don't see the sphenoid though. The sphenoid bone is really intact there. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that just a CT scan that was just scanned in and made 3D like this, which is kind of neat. You can show what's going on. There's a hyoid bone right there floating down here. Here you can see the cervical spine. Up on top there, you can see atlas articulating with the occipital condyles of the occipital bone. You can see C2 there, and I could get my laser pointer there. But here you can see there's C1, the first atlas, the first cervical vertebrae. There's C2 right there. Here's occiput or the occipital bone right there, and you can see right where the atlas and occiput articulate there. There's the occipital condyles. What else did I want to show you? I think that's it. So I'll let you submit that. Again, looking at this, you got the zygomatic bone fractured, you got the mandible fractured, and maxilla, temporal bone, nasal bone. We got a bunch of different fractures here. So I'll let you submit that, and if you guys have any questions, let me know. Other than that, the rest of the time is yours to work on any of these activities, any other activities for lab.